officially good morning and welcome this, or good afternoon. It's still morning for me in my brain, but afternoon for everyone else. Good afternoon. We're doing a little lunchtime gentle yoga class, and for those of you that have always wanted to basically just lie down at lunch, this is the class for you, because we're going to lie down and we're going to stay down. Now, what we're going to do first is we're going to spend some time allowing the shoulder to gently release some postural habits. And by what I mean by that is sometimes, especially when we work at a desk or work over a computer, is over time the head of the arm bone starts to get tugged in this forward direction. And really it's better when it's stabilized more in the back. But the muscles that do that are very deep in the shoulder. And so we can't really get to them by stretching per se, because what we wind up stretching is the pectoralis or the trapezius or the latissimus, but not these deep postural muscles that hold the arm bone in the shoulder. So the way that we get to those is by hanging out for a while in a pose, and that's what we're going to set ourselves up with. So we're going to set ourselves up with a little elevated rib cage so that the head of the arm bone will, over the time that we hold it, hopefully, start to release some of that tension from pec minor and from some of the muscles that live in the back of the shoulder blade. We know those as the rotator cuff muscles. If there's tension in those muscles caused by our postural habits, then this really gentle, long space where we're going to hang out is going to help us address those issues, okay? It's a little bit of science for you. So I am rolling up a blanket, and I like this for this specific purpose. I like to do different things in my upper back, depending on what I'm trying to target. But for this purpose, a blanket works really great. Or you can use a pranayama bolster if you happen to have one of those. So it's a little bit narrow and not too fluffy. And I've got the ends of the blanket that are all the most even ends, the folded edges, those are going down here next to my sacrum. And then these flippy, floppy, loose edges, those are going to be up at the top because they're not really going to impact me. Having a more steady surface under the low back is usually kinder. Okay, so if we're going to stay a while, it's nicer to have a little bit more structure there. Now, I'm going to use a pillow under my legs too. And if you've got a strap handy, just put that within reach. Right, so if you got a yoga strap or you have something that you use like a yoga strap, a towel, a belt, a tie, whatever, dog leash, all of those work. Okay, so then I'm going to lie back over this blanket. Now, some people are going to want that blanket right up against the sacrum. For me, I like it better if it's a little closer to my ribs, okay? Like the lumbar spine, like my ribs stop right about up here, and then I've got the blanket a little bit lower than that. So all my ribs are supported and a little bit of my lumbar, but the curve of my back is sort of allowed to cascade over the end of that blanket, if that makes any sense. Now you can take your blanket and kind of fold it in on itself to elevate your head, if you'd like your head a little elevated. And then what we've got going on here is a sort of opportunity for the arm bone to hang backwards, okay? Now if I stretch my arms out super wide, that's gonna hit pec major a little bit more, right? So the big muscle of my chest. But if I'm targeting this smaller muscle, pec minor, which attaches the rib cage, the arm bone, and it goes through and attaches to my shoulder blade. That guy, I want my arms in just a little bit closer, okay? So this is a little more subtle. You may not even feel a stretch, that's okay. We're just gonna let gravity reset this shoulder joint that may have gotten slightly out of alignment. So I'm noticing, I don't really have any discomfort with my legs, but if I put this bolster underneath my knees or my thighs, will that be a little more comfy? And oh yeah, the answer is yes. So you could put a second pillow or a second blanket or whatever you've got underneath your legs if you're feeling just a little bit of discomfort from the hip flexors pulling on you. All right, so I'm not hugging my arm bones in against me, that's counterproductive. I'm just sort of figuring out like where do they naturally want to land and letting them hang out there. And then I'm just going to trust the process. Breathe. Try to let myself relax across the front of the shoulder. And over time, as this happens, happens, right? So we're gonna stay for about 5 minutes, but as this starts to happen, where the postural habit is gently let go, you may wind up like snuggling that shoulder blade under you a little bit more, because the muscle that's tugging it off the back starts to let go. And so that is fine. Like when those little movements arise, definitely go with that. In the meantime, you can let your body do its thing and then concentrate on the breath. One of the things that's been the coolest thing for me for my last, at least 5, maybe 10 years worth of yoga practice has really just been breath awareness. I find it really interesting. And it's really just because I started noticing, right? And then as I notice, like more layers of interesting shows up. So I'm sort of fascinated by the difference between the right lung and the left lung. Because there's a difference. The right lung has 3 lobes, left lung only has 2. As I take a big breath, there's like that slight difference in the way that I feel those lungs. And I'm fascinated by the sort of tension and release sensation of the inhale and exhale. And I like the sort of oceanic sound of it. There's just a million layers that you can notice. So just pick something, check it out, get curious. Curious too about how kind of a subtle release of the shoulder impacts the way my neck feels and my jaw. There's this big muscle here that kind of holds onto the collarbone and the sternum and the jaw all together. And as my shoulder returns to its kind of normal posture, those muscles that have been compensating also get to relax. And so I might feel like a release of tension around my mouth, or a release of tension kind of up through the sides of the head here. So you're just kind of noticing what's true for you. And this is one of those poses that like I know I have in my arsenal, and yet sometimes I forget to use it. Just lay down over a blanket. It's a really lovely way to reset your shoulder, especially like at the end of a day when you've been leaning over your computer all day. Or whatever you lean over, right? It would be good for hairdressers because they hold their arms in a kind of static position quite a lot. They would be good for dentists. It would be good for like anyone who has a job where they have to hold their upper body in one position. Usually in the forward position, right? Not many of us have jobs where you have to hold our arms behind our back. so this is a little more common for forward position kinds of work. We're gonna stay for just shy of 1 more minute, about 45 more seconds here. Take a big breath. And we're going to let go with a big Now, we're going to take this thing out from underneath our back. So we're gonna roll to your side and slide this guy out. Oh, and then come back onto your back for a moment. And just notice the sensation. So here's the thing that's always interesting to me. It's like, do a yoga pose, see what happens, right? And so I've done this yoga pose where I, like a restorative kind of yoga pose, where I laid over this blanket. And now what happened? Well, I can still sort of feel the impression of that blanket left behind. So something has happened to my tissue that has kind of molded itself around the edges of the blanket. In terms of my chest and my upper back, it feels like it's broadened out, right? And so this is just my kind of intuitive or my sensory way of experiencing this yoga pose. But these are really excellent poses, these really gentle, subtle things, and really restorative yoga and yin yoga also to some degree are really aiming at these kinds of really subtle postural realignments, right? Because our posture is so important to the overall health of our body. And when the shoulder is kind of chronically rolling forward, it also shortens our breath and makes it harder for us to work in the deep tissue in the lungs, makes us, you know, it's like it just closes down the secondary breathing muscles. This pec minor guy helps us with really deep breathing, right? And so if that muscle is chronically tight from a postural habit, then it can't assist us in that really big final lift of the ribs to get that really deep, full breath. So, important work that we're doing, even though it's kind of subtle. All right, so now we're gonna get more into this pec major, and we're also gonna get to the outer part of the hip. So this will feel a little more stretchy. So we're gonna, maybe, if you're not tight there, it might not. We're gonna take the legs over to one side, okay? And then you, depending on how this goes, if you've got a little more room, you can wrap your leg around. Now, I like to do that and give myself a little soft cushion so that I can hook my leg over that cushion. Now, I'm readjusting my upper back, so I pressed into the floor with my elbows on the back of my skull, and I picked up my upper back and put it back down, okay? Because I'm gonna try to get to this pec major muscle. The pec major attaches from the breastbone, it covers the whole chest, it goes all the way down to the bottom of my rib cage. Like, we think about it as just being right here, but really it's a gigantic muscle that covers most of the front of the body, okay? And then it attaches up here on my arm bone. And so when I take this arm out to the side, and hopefully I've adjusted the posture in my shoulder enough that this doesn't hurt, if it does, adjust the arm, so that I can get this kind of sense of opening or lengthening across this big muscle in my chest. And then, of course, this outer hip, and the muscle on the side of the hip that stabilizes the hip, the gluteus medius, and all of the lovely things attached to that as well. Maybe even we can feel this in our glute major, and for the most part, it's a lovely spinal twist as well. So we're gonna hang out here for a couple moments, about another minute, and just feel our body kind of releasing into this shape. Sometimes it feels better for me to turn my head into like direction of the knees. Sometimes I keep it in the middle, which is kind of halfway through the twist. Sometimes I'll deepen the twist of the neck and turn my head the other way. It kind of depends on a muscle that lives right here as to how that feels. Like, does that muscle feel really tight and pinchy? And if it does, then I come on back. But if it feels okay to release that shape as well, then it's nice to turn the head the other way. Take about 3 more breaths here. When you get to that tippy top of the breath, like take that little extra sip. See if you can feel that little muscle right underneath this big glute, or glute. That's an interesting little Freudian slip. But in any case, this big pec neck muscle. Can you feel the little dude tucked underneath him when you get to that really big breath? Last one. Yeah, and then we're gonna bring the head back, bring the legs back, and then release that shoulder and arm. And give yourself a little bit of movement. I like to do a little bit of movement in my upper body and arm. And I like to do a little movement with the legs. And sometimes even, just a little back massage right across the back of that sacrum and up into my lower back. Where those big muscles that hold my pelvis to my spine and my ribs are. Little stabilizers. Okay. Big stabilizers. Really, they're kind of big stabilizers. All right, so we're going the other direction, as long as you feel like your spine has kind of come back to neutral. So we're gonna take the legs over, and I already know that I'm gonna want some little soft cushiness there. And then I'm gonna adjust my upper back so that I've got my upper back resting nice and firm on the floor. And this is where you experiment, okay? Maybe better if the arm goes straight out to the side. Maybe it's better if the arm's a little higher. Sometimes it changes for me. Some days I like it in one spot. Today, more right here on the edge feels better, whereas some days more like a cactus up a little higher feels better. And again, I'm just gonna check in with the muscles in my neck. Sometimes one side's different than the other. And then decide which version of that is the best, okay? Now we're sort of allowing ourselves a chance to settle into that stretch. And for me, this right side pec is tighter than the left side pec, so I get a lot more sensation here than I did on the other side. My right hip a little tighter, a lot more sensation there. I'm right-handed, wonder if that's the reason. Probably. Again, these are like little habits that when we're young, we don't really know impact us. As you get older, you start to feel how they actually weave the connective tissue of the body in a certain direction, right? So we start to feel these kind of tugs and asymmetries a little more as we get older. And maybe because we have fewer of the little cells that help keep things moving along and help things stay hydrated and flowing. Or maybe, you know, a little less hyaluronic acid in our tissue. Maybe we're a little drier, a little more brittle, emotionally as well as physically. Sorry, I'm joking with myself. I remind myself not to be brittle. For about 30, a little over 30 more seconds. Noticing, like, where does this land for you? And I'm noticing right now that I'm holding with my inner thigh, so I'm gonna let go of that inner thigh hold and see what happens. I think I'm trying to keep myself away from this furniture. So sometimes I notice like my nervous system doing things that I hadn't noticed it doing. And that is one of them. So we're going to take a big breath. We're just going to bring the head back to start with, bring the legs back. Once that pressure is gone, then we can move a little bit around the hips and around the arm. All right. Now we're going to kind of mimic what we just did, but mostly it's going to be a movement in the shoulder. So we're going to roll to one side, and I'm going to come toward you guys. Hopefully this will be easy to see. So laying on my side, I'm going to take this
arm that I would normally use as my headrest, and I'm going to put that straight out in front of me, like this, okay? Hopefully, let me back up a little bit so I'm not off this view screen here. Okay. So that arm is gonna go straight out in front of me. So because of that, I'm gonna wanna have a little support under my head. Now, if you've got a yoga block or something, or a pillow, you can definitely use that. I'm just shoving that blanket in there, and that'll work just fine. Mostly, I just wanna create a situation where this bottom shoulder is nice and stable, and I'm pulling that bottom shoulder like into my back a little bit. So it's not coming up toward my ear too much, and my head is nicely supported. This arm is my moving arm anyway, okay? But I want the bottom to be nice and stable. So I'm just gonna give myself a moment here. Now, bending your knees will make the bottom half of you a little more stable. You can do this either way, whatever's more appropriate. So now this arm that's on the top of the stack here is gonna go over my head, and I'm gonna take it all the way out and let your torso go with you. And then when you get to about height, the shoulder height or chest height, come on back to the center. So we're basically just kind of drawing like an arch or a rainbow over the top of our head, okay? And if you're like me and you've got furniture in your way, just work around it. It'll be all right. Okay, so we're gonna do this 3 more times, and I'm reaching through my arm, right on. I'm flexing at my wrist to avoid my furniture, but I'm still reaching through the arm. So I've got all this space here, all this space. I've got to do a little adjustment to get around my furniture, but you got the idea, okay? So I'm still doing that work at my shoulder. One more time. Stretch up, 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 up. We're letting the chest go with us as we open back here. And if I pull my chest forward, you can feel the difference there. Try that. And then bring the arm forward, okay? So a little bit of work together is fine. What we're looking at here is kind of creating this range of motion with the arm that helps reestablish balance in the rotator cuff muscles. All right, let's do the other side. So I'm just gonna flip over. And I'm gonna stabilize that bottom shoulder into my back, get my head supported, adjust my legs so that I'm stable, and then I've got both arms up front, okay? So now my arms are nice and stable. I've put my shoulder blades onto my back, and now I'm gonna stretch through this arm as far around as I can go, and then bring it straight back when I get to chest height. Reach up. Now, if you can't do a full circle like this, do whatever range of motion you can do. If your range of motion doesn't go over your head right now, then you're gonna work with this movement to reestablish that balance. And there's other movements as well that you can get from your physical therapist to help you reestablish balance in your shoulder. All right, we got 2 more to go. So going up and over and reach through the edge, bring it back, reestablish that connection to your shoulder, and then go up and over, reach through the edge, bring it back, and then we're gonna come back to the center. All right, so we've done some lovely things for our shoulder. I'm gonna keep this blanket. Now that I've made a mess of it, I'm gonna have to refold it. But I'm gonna put that underneath my head, okay? So I've got a little bit of softness there. And then, I'm going to use my strap. We're gonna do some things for our hips. So before we go too far, notice how things went with your shoulder. And then we're gonna do 2 stretches for our leg that help release the hips. So you're gonna bring your one leg in, doesn't matter which one. I'm gonna start with my left leg. And we're gonna stretch that leg up straight and then bring the other leg out. And I'm gonna use a pillow just under the leg that I'm relaxing, okay? So I'm gonna reach into this leg that's on the floor, press the back of my thigh into that pillow to help kind of stabilize myself. And then I'm gonna see like how far do I want this hamstring stretch to go. I've got my hand through the loop of my strap. You might just be holding onto the end. You can wrap it around your hand like this. So put your hand in it, go around, and then wrap around your wrist and come back up. And then holding the strap like that kind of helps give your a little bit more structure because your wrist will help you hold it, all right? If you've got a loop in your strap, go through the loop and then wrap the ends. And it's just a little bit less work on the fingers if your fingers have been very busy. Alrighty. So we're gonna stay for about 30 more seconds here. Giving the back of the leg some love. Push through my heel and pull my toes down. Oh, it gets into my calf a little bit more. 2 more breaths. And then we're gonna go out to the side. Now, I'm gonna run into furniture, but that's actually far enough. If I kind of let my hip roll into the ground and I work this leg, I'm feeling a stretch nicely through my adductor, this kind of muscle on your inner thigh. Muscles, there's more than one. Now I can organize myself a little bit differently. Oh, if I want to do a little bit bigger shape, okay? So I'm just kind of feeling that out. You feel you. You can put support underneath your leg if you need a little support under the bottom. Oh. Sometimes for me the adductors are quite tender, especially the attachment that lives on the back of the pelvis, the bottom of the pelvis. That groin area can be quite tender. So just treating yourself well. We got about 30 more seconds here. If you're tensing up, try not to tense up, like try to stay loose through the upper body, your jaw. Your legs are working with each other a little bit. But other than that, the rest of it doesn't have to get all tight and excited. So we got a nice big breath. And then we're gonna come on back to the middle. Now we're gonna do the opposite side. So all I'm gonna do is take this foot and put it right in there, switch, so that I can get the opposite side, okay? So reaching out through the leg that's on the bottom, and I'm gonna still use this pillow because it's helpful, kind of press down into that. And then I'm going to find the appropriate amount of hamstring stretch for this leg. And again, I can push on the gas pedal, that takes away some of the calf muscle stretch. If I pull my foot back, it adds onto it. These couples, like these stretches combined with the twist, release pretty much everything around the hip. And then the work we did with the shoulder, the kind of really subtle work, that one stretch, the one movement pattern, those kind of reestablish the balance of the shoulder. So if you've only got 30 minutes, we got 30 seconds by the way, if you only have 30 minutes to practice, this is a really great, a great kind of practice to kind of balance out, relieving a little bit of the tension in all the areas where we carry tension in the body. The hips, because those have to stabilize us to walk around in the world, and the shoulder, because that is stabilizing, or it, you know, it's where the majority of our movement emanates. Our movement emanates from our arms, right? So we're going out to the side, and again, like I don't have a piece of furniture now, so I'm going to create a little structure here with a block, so that I'm only going just the right amount, so I'm not overtaxing or overdoing these delicate little inner thigh muscles. Oops. Just gotta reestablish my support here. There we go. Now, stabilizing the rest. Now that I've got that all set up. And kind of feeling that out. And this side's a little more tender, so kind of creating that slight bend in my knee, or working into it and out of it a little bit is helpful. And again, just noticing like where are you tugging. If it feels like you're tugging right up against a bone, be kinder. Back off a little bit. If it feels like, oh, it's all right in the middle of the muscle, it's a little bit more appropriate. So we got about 30 seconds left. Take a nice big breath. And then we're gonna gently come on back to the center. We're gonna release the leg. Now, before I stretch out, and I'm gonna stretch out in just a second because I wanna see what happened. But before I do that, I'm gonna give myself this little shimmy, and then I'm gonna put all my limbs up, and I'm gonna shake them. I'm gonna shake them till everything rattles. Try to get it to shake like into the center of the body. So it's not just the hands and the feet, but you can feel that vibrating all the way into your up torso. And just fun things with your voice. All right, now drop everything. And just, it feels so good. Shaking is underrated. All right, just relax your body for a second. And I'm snuggling my shoulder blades under me, adjusting my head, adjusting my hips. I'm just gonna lie still for a minute and feel. It's just, essentially, we just kind of push the reset button on our posture and on those places in our body that are responsible for most of the movement that emanates around us, right? Most of our movement either comes from our arms and this amazing shoulder joint. It's amazingly well designed. And then from our hips and these giant muscles across the sides of our hips and around the back side and then the front side. That we're kind of designed for walking and moving, and yet mostly we have to sit, and so they all tighten up, right? So yogis, you could stay here for as long as you want. But because this is a lunchtime class and you might want to go get yourself something to eat, we're gonna do a little bit of massage back and forth, little windshield wipers. We're gonna roll to the side. You can do it whenever you're ready. And then we're gonna come up to a seated position. And if you're ready to go off and have some lunch, we'll take a nice big breath together and send you on your merry way. So nice big inhale. Big deep sigh. Namaste, beautiful yogis and beautiful yogi pets. Enjoy the rest of your day.